Hey guys, how's it going? It's Kyra here with another Exos Heroes video, and in today's video I want to break down exactly how to beat the bosses here in chapter 15. So if you guys want to check it out, did a whole stream on beating chapter 15, so you just want to see its entirety, feel free to check that out. But I want to talk about probably the hardest parts of this encounter, which is going to be the bosses. Signature Force is going to play a big role in being able to beat this. They kind of cheesed it. If you look at the stats of these characters, where what they did is they really cranked up the defense of these guys. I'm talking like 40k defense for these characters in chapter 15. Why I'm saying you need Signature Force is because Signature Force ignores defense. So it's a really cheesy way to make your damage not matter unless you have Signature Force. So just keep that in mind. Let's just actually talk about how to beat these guys. So this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. If you look at this guy, they don't do this immediately. They at least give you a couple levels here. Like this one right here, he has normal stats. That's totally doable, totally normal stats. If you look here, look at that. 40k defense, 7,000 attack. That's more attack than my battery has. And I have a pretty heavily invested in battery. So good luck trying to land Dishearten unless you really have a leveled up Rachel. Oh, look at that. Like Baelish, you know, all these stats, these passives are just not going to land. You're going to need a ton of stats to be able to land certain things. So just keep that in mind when trying to beat these bosses. Okay, let's start with this guy. So the big thing to keep in mind here is going to be the Guardian Stones. You need to break them because you're on a clock here with these bosses. So let me go over the passives, then we can go over the Guardian Stones, which characters I think would be good for this. Tenacity. Grants the tenacity mark to self if break status is triggered on self, reduces the duration of break by 2 turns for each tenacity stack. So you break for 7. Then what happens is if you break them again, they break for 5. You break them again, they break for 3. Then you break for 1, and then they just can't be broken anymore. It just keeps reducing every single time. So then they just won't be broken. Status immunity. So immune to all status effects. Special reduces normal damage received by 65%. So then the damage is so they're way tankier than even 30k defense implies. Then increases attack at the start of round by 20%. So you're on a clock here. And then special increases own attack by 50% for 10 turns when own turn resets. Then decreases hit of all enemies by 70% every 2 rounds. Start to see the pattern here. All of this is to make it to where it's a big DPS race. Not only do you need to break them, but when you do break them, you better do a ton of damage, because you're not going to get that many turns of break the next go around, and then he's constantly building in power. He's essentially hitting an range timer eventually when you keep adding more and more attack. And then every 2 rounds, you're going to get decreases the hit. So you better get him out of here really quick. So I think the important thing is to be able to break him easily, and then you're going to need a ton of characters with a signature force if you want to beat this. Still, you're going to really want to focus, even when you do have signature force, you're going to want characters that have high single target damage moves after broken, because that's going to really amplify your signature force damage. Burst moves that are single target, so you're not losing a lot of your signature force damage, is going to be a really big deal. And then the rest of his kit is normal. And so if you look at that, he's one of the bosses. Tantalo, all these characters have the same effect, so except a little different. So then Tantalo, his is different in this. I just happen to use Ramsh for this. That's why I was able to beat this. But if I wasn't using Ramsh, I don't think I would have been able to beat this, because his is a little different. Because the things that stay are going to be the status effect immunity, reduces normal damage received by 65%, and then self increases attack at the start of the round by 20%. Tenacity grants the tenacity mark to self if break status is triggered on self, reduces the duration of break by 2 turns for each tenacity stack. So that is going to stay the same. I believe that's on all the bosses. He is not gaining the 50% and then reducing the hit, but he's healing 1.5% of his own health at the start of every turn, which is a massive amount when you have 471,000 health. He's healing, and he is increasing his attack with that one passive. You're still on a clock here, maybe not as fast as a clock as Nero, but he's so much tankier that essentially kind of the same thing, because he's massively tankier. He has way higher block amount, so you're really going to need to hit him hard here. Same break requirements. Another thing to keep in mind when it comes to the break on all these characters is going to be they have 10 Guardian Stones. Visually, you will see 5 Guardian Stones, so that's a big deal when it comes to being able to break them. When it resets, you're going to break the stones. It's just like Dragon. You're going to break the stones, then the stones are going to come back. That's Tantalo. So Ramj, very important on here, because Ramj is going to not only give you the purple break, but then reduce that damn healing. Okay, let's talk about Baelish. obviously has crazy stats. You're going to be on an even bigger clock because he's going to hit harder. So he has the Mana Absorb passive where it removes enemy buff and gains mana. Then he has the typical passive that they're all going to have with the status effect immunity. He's gaining attack. And then he has the tenacity. Once you're on a clock, you can't keep breaking him over and over. And then this is huge, where he has the special once every 2 rounds revives all dead allies. But the main thing is you really need to be focused on Baelish, or he's just going to keep reviving. I want to say this one got close because he does have a ton of health. He has 415,000 health. He has a ton of defense. He hits hard. He's going to be gaining attack every round. He's reviving these guys. So you're going to want to have a really well-balanced, a lot of AoE, but also good amount of single target to actually beat this. And for all of these matchups, if you guys want to see it, because this, I've already done this. I already have the video to beat it, but I really wanted to just talk about the specifics on this because there's these passives are, I think it really important to break down, and hopefully it'll be able to help you guys be able to make a strategy to beat chapter 15, because there's actually pretty decent rewards through here that I think are worth picking up, like mainly ultimate orbs and stuff. So, and also if you watch that video, you'll be able to see all the rewards you get throughout this. Like I know earlier on you get 1,000 soul seals, that's really good, and then I think a couple of the times in here you get ultimate orbs. So let's talk about actual characters that I think would be really good for this, because the big requirement is going to be a signature force, 100%. But I'm going to break it down by based on whatever faction you invested into. I'm going to pick like some of the highlight characters that I think will be really useful here. First thing, regardless of faction, so we have all the potential factions for signature force. The big thing is you're going to need to, regardless of what general you use, you need to at least be here. You need to be at least be here on this to really want to use one of these characters. The things we're going to really want to look at are going to be, we need green, but we need green, light, and purple. But the main one we really want is light. We want to really be able to consistently break light characters, because there's so many more stones in this for light than there is the other ones. So looking at the staple characters that regardless of faction you're going to really want is going to be Iris, and you're going to want Ramj. Those are going to be 2 big ones, because you're not going to be able to beat Tantalo without some kind of heal reduction, probably. So you're really going to want Ramj. He's kind of in the weird spot in the game where he's almost mandatory for a lot of content, like a lot of trials content, a lot of campaign. They really don't have other good options. Like Carrie's a new one that is breaking heals, but she's nowhere close to ready for this. She doesn't even have Signature 4 open yet. She just came out a few days ago. Based on my comment history, maybe not in this game, but in other games, no one ever looks at the date of when the video comes out. So at the time of this video, that he's really the only option, and probably the only good character good enough to even justify putting all these resources on to be able to complete this. He's a black fake horse, so he's relatively easier to get, but still maybe someone could be without him and at this point in the game. But that's that, and he's going to be the one that covers your purple, like your lunar part of your kit. For yellow, I feel like the 2 big ones are going to be, first one, obviously, Iris, very good character, going to give mana for everyone. She's going to be the battery that gives everyone that has burst moves enough damage to really push you through the rest of it. Signature force requirement for this is going to be Northbound Frosty for both of them, which is kind of nice, but I would say she's going to be one of the best for yellow, and also one of the best for helping boost everyone's damage as well. And she covers the lunar requirement too, because when you have Signature Force on her, she's going to hit lunar. So she'll be able to cover both for breaking the stones. So I think she does a really good job. Big thing though is try to get her. The one thing I wished I had when I did this is I wish I had more enhanced element. So I wish I was debating if I was struggling with this. You might want to go really far with this, because usually the far as I go with these is 2 to 3. This one, if people see this right here, I literally, when it comes to this, like almost never do this. I just got stupid lucky, probably the luckiest I've ever been in this game, where I literally just one-shot it all the way from 2 all the way to 6. I was like, screw it, I'll try it. I would normally never do this, but I got lucky as hell. I got 6, but as you can see, pretty much everyone else is 2 or 3. So it's 100% going from 0 to 2, and then it is 70% going from 2 to 3. It goes to like 50% and then 30%. Like you got to be crazy lucky. because it's so many resources. So I'm very careful with ever doing this. I almost never even risk it. This might be one of those times, especially on Iris. Like if you have FC Iris, she's one of the best characters in the game. So you don't feel bad ever, you know, trying to use resources to make her better. Another thing too is you're really going to want these characters. You're going to want them all awakened. At this point, there's very niche circumstances, almost never, that you wouldn't want to awaken a character that you're using pretty consistently. So you're going to want them awakened. You're going to want them with unleashed potential on them. You mean like at least the increased defense, the increased attack, the increased health, at the minimum, if you're going to want to be expected to survive. So let's look at green characters based on faction. So we can just start with the obvious one, which is going to be Greenland. So if you have Greenland, you're going to want, you know, Tantalo is obviously really good for this because not only is he going to help you survive, but he's going with his passive. He actually hits pretty hard because you have the unleashed potential effect if you actually really invest in him. He's like one of the best, if not the best character in the game at the moment. So it's kind of a no-brainer to invest in him. Reducing all the potential crits. If you're lucky enough to have him, I think a lot of people are going to be asking like, oh, how do I beat this without him? That's going to be a little trickier. So we'll look into that here in a second. And then Rara, obviously really good option. Bathory, like I think the Greenland faction is pretty well talked about. This is what got me through it. The big addition that I added though was Ramj. It was Ramj and Iris from the front line with Tantalo, Bathory, and Rara. That's what I ended up using. Let's think about it from the perspective of a different faction. So that's the Greenland faction. Let's look at the Rachel's faction. And if you're really invested in Rachel's faction, let's look. I think it's going to be actually really tough from this faction here because you're gonna want a green character. You're gonna need to break these characters, and you're gonna be on a clock for the kind of damage you're gonna need to be able to do. So if you're really focused on this faction, I would want to splash in. Like this faction does not provide a green character that is worth using. It just doesn't provide it. So keep that in mind when if you've only invested into this faction, you're going to need some other Syndra Force from another faction in conjunction with this faction to be able to break Woodstone. I would say the top tier character is going to be Tantalo. Also going to need to be able to break Light, which you'll be able to do with FC April here. I think that the big thing about this, especially in chapter 15, is going to be able to get enough attack to be able to really reliably apply Dishearten, because so much of your kit is going to be reliant on getting Disheartened. First thing is going to be able to reduce their attack, which is going to really help out in survivability, or my bad, reduce their defense by 20%. Even though, to be honest, when it comes to this, like I had this issue with the Banga faction, whereas being able to reduce defense almost doesn't matter. Like with the Banga faction, you reduce 1,000 defense. Who cares? It doesn't do anything to a 40k defense person. 20% defense, you're still dealing with 20k defense. It's completely useless. So the big thing that you're gonna have going for you is just having the Disheartened passive on them to be able to proc April, and then I don't have enough attack to test it, but probably they're status immune to it. Yeah, so you're really not going to be working with too much here when it comes to this faction. Hopefully you'll just have enough stats. You're going to have at least a light character here to be able to break the stones, and then you're just going to need to unload with Baraka, Zeon, and Rachel, just doing enough damage. You guys are going to have a ton of damage regardless, because this is a burst move with Syndra Force. It's all based on mana, so ideally you're going to have a ton of mana stacked up, and you just go crazy with your burst moves, and hopefully that's enough. That would be my recommendation. But the big thing is you're going to need a green character. When it comes, this faction doesn't have much survivability associated with it, so you're going to need to splash in some of these other characters. And so hopefully we'll cover those, and I'll kind of think of it like the best other alternatives for you depending on what you pulled. I'd say Talia is going to be really big for this, for survivability. Tantalo, obviously. Things that can heal you up, that can ideally mitigate damage. Both of them kind of do that with their 20% defense passive to everyone with Talia. Tantalo obviously does it with reducing crit damage. It's just kind of tough because you also, that your main characters are not breaking anything, because this is a fire character. He's machine, Zeon's fire. So that's another wrinkle to this whole thing. But I think it's probably doable if you ever really invested into Rachel faction. Okay, so next, we've already covered Greenland. I think a lot of these characters are really good for this. A ton of these characters are. These characters really fit this. You know, you got Rara. Bathory is just a good passive. You're not, her attack is, she just has to beat the attack on your team. She doesn't need to beat the attack on theirs, because their stats are unfair, you know, how they want to make the difficulty. So just having to have the most attack on your team, like Dorka, Bathory, stuff like that, is going to be a lot easier to meet those requirements on these kind of missions than it is other versions of these passives. So FC Talia is going to be really good. Probably FC Chadi is going to be really good too, as a good survivability option if you need it. Illum's going to be good because be able to break stones. If you're missing one of those key characters to be able to break stones, I can totally see Illum being pretty clutch, even though she's machine. Obviously, Tantalo is probably god tier for this, but these are going to be the main characters you're going to be wanting to use when it comes to the Greenland faction. If you're a little further into Signature Force, having 2 of one faction as kind of a splash into other factions is going to be really nice for the 15% boost to all stats. So keep that in mind as well. Janae's faction. I think FC Janae is going to be really clutch for this. So let's pull up her kit really quick, just so we can kind of go over. And she might be the character that you're going to want to splash in to these other factions to really help out. So big thing is going to be increases the attack speed of all allies, which is nice. I don't think that's going to matter too much because I believe you're going to mostly be faster, but still having the attack speed is going to be really clutch. And then decreases the attack all enemies by 40% for 7 turns. That's awesome. It can really help with survivability. And then the charm is probably not going to be applied, but I would say lowering the attack and boosting the speed is probably going to be pretty helpful. And she's a green character. That's going to be really nice too. And then she just has really good moves. She's just a really good character. She has this encore passive. She's giving everyone mana. She's just obviously a good character, going to really fit the team for this, especially being able to reduce the damage. And then the attention mark for 7 turns when the skill hits, because the AI is dumb, so a lot of times she's probably going to get hit, so increases damage over time on the target by 100%, so you'll be able to have that effect potentially. I don't think that's going to really apply for the bosses, but just getting through the waves and getting to that point is probably going to be pretty helpful. And then this right here, this fan club afflicts target with anti-fan mark when attacked, triggers double team on all living allies if the health of the enemy with anti-fan is 30% or lower. Has a lot of good things going for her. I wish I can try her to see all the mechanics at work, but I think the big one is going to be debuff, because I believe this should apply, because it's not a status effect. It doesn't have the same text color that is going to like stun is usually yellow, something like that, so that's why it doesn't apply to these bosses, but I believe this would. So maybe I'm wrong, but regardless, just being able to having the speed, just having her as a good character on there, the other characters, at least everyone else, the waves to even get to that point are all of that's gonna apply to them. I think this faction especially is going to be really good paired with other factions if you just have like this double team of, or you just pick 2 of these characters. Like for example, I think FC Emma and Janae would be really good as like a pairing. Or if this is like really the main faction you invested into, then I think Janae, Shell, Emma going to be really good. You're going to cover literally all of it. You're just going to need a light character, and then that's when Ramj and Iris would be the perfect like 2 combo to plug in with these 3 in Janae, Emma, and Shell to be able to close it out. I think FC Adams might be pretty clutch to be able to actually do enough damage when you get there. Reason why I like Emma is because she moon character, so a Luna character, so she'll be able to actually break the stone for it, but then she's going to be reducing defense. Is she reduce? Still not going to reduce enough. Actually, one thing, it's kind of a trap, because she's not going to reduce enough defense. But the one thing that she might have going for her is to be able to reduce the target's attack. And that will actually matter, because it's a percentage of their own attack. You want percentages of their stats, not percentage of your own, because their stats are just so damn high that, and even still, on the defense side, it doesn't really matter too much, because breaking the defense, 20% of the defense with Dishearten doesn't matter. So keep that in mind. The attack is the stat that you can probably really actually meaningfully affect for survivability, but when it comes to defense, just forget about it. Shell I would like because she gives the turn, she passes out the turns for other characters with FC Shell, so being able to just choose which character is actually useful at that moment is going to be really helpful, and she boosts their attack when she does it. So I really like FC Shell for this, even though she doesn't have the right typing, but I think it's totally doable with these other factions. It's just the Greenland faction just really seems to fit. The thing that I'm realizing when I'm thinking about this, when I'm thinking about all the other factions, is the characters that you really want to have for this, you really want to splash in, are going to be Ramj and Iris. And if you don't have, especially Ramj, if you don't have Ramj, I think it's gonna be really tough. I don't know. I don't even know if it's possible. I'm gonna have to try it, but I don't know if it's possible without Ramj, Tantalo specifically. But Iris is just really useful as well. And she's easily splashable. She covers the light typing She gives mana. She's just very useful for this. Okay, so if you're Wasted Red, talking about Wasted Red here, I think this faction is actually really good for this. And I was thinking about splashing in a couple of these characters because I think this faction is really fits into what you're trying to do to try to beat chapter 15. So you got Garf, who's going to give a ton of survivability, and he does decent damage. But he breaks stones really well. So you can either go FC Garf or normal Garf. Both Garfs are going to work really well for this. And then he fits with Signature Force because you got this move. This move, you know, it's going to do okay. You at least have other characters like in FC Ridley here that's really going to fit for this because he's a nature character. And he does tons of single target. He has this burst move here. This 750% damage, not going to do too much. But it being a single target burst move is going to do a ton with Signature Force. That's why I like this. You get a lot of survivability with the combination of Command. Vanguard, I guess, is the name of his passives. So I really like Greenland. I really like Dorka, and I really like Garf for this because it's all about his team stats, not their stats. Breaking their stats is really hard to ever do unless you're really invested into those characters. That's why I just think this is way more reliable, way more consistent for giving advice to people, except for very niche cases. He's going to be really useful. Rudley's going to be really useful. Annie, I think, could be really nice for this because you're going to be giving mana consistently, and for all PvE content, that's going to be really nice to have. The big question, depending on your situation, you might want to go FC Rudley. You might want to go just normal Rudley for this because this is just the normal Rudley version, but you're going to get a lot more survivability with FC Rudley, but you're not going to do nearly as much damage. So I think that trade-off is going to be a big question. Then lastly, trying to figure out which character to do lunar damage. I would just say Ramsh. You're really going to want Ramsh for this to be able to close that out. You're looking for like a group of 3. There's really no other characters I can think of from this faction that I would really want to use. Valar is nice because he reduces the attack with this executioner mark here. Might help with survivability. Him to keep in mind, especially if like let me reread FC Valar. Maybe he would be worth, or she would be worth throwing in on the team if you're really invested into Garf's faction. Barrier Will could be nice. The Shackles, activated target with executioner mark, gains 5 or more mana, decreases target's attack by 10% for every mana they have. So you can actually, you know, reduce a decent amount of attack here with her, and she has a good move for this, you know, 4 mana single target move, so you'll be able to take advantage of Signature Force. Might need some kind of extra oomph with the team there. That's why I was thinking instead of going this version of Rudley, you just go normal version so you can really guarantee you do enough damage. But I think this team could really work out for this. I don't think you'd have a problem with surviving, and you'd be able to break the stones very easily. So I think this faction would actually work very well for beating chapter 15. And then here, let's just gonna speed this up. I'm talking about this for a while. So Northbound Frosty. So Shifrakin, for me, you know, his passive, he needs to have the highest defense. He's just never gonna apply it. Just period. He is really tough for me to recommend this guy. Maybe on the waves, he'd be kind of nice because he's going to be able to additional targets with freeze, so you can be able to break that. But it's tough for me to recommend him. I would say probably the characters I would say is FC, mainly FC Ramsh is going to be the best one here. FC Valentina would be kind of nice. She's going to do a ton of damage with this, and then being able to mana burn, which could actually be pretty useful. Actually, no, you can't even use that because you need Fear of the Abyss, and Fear of the Abyss will never apply. So this faction actually gets pretty bodied because the general just doesn't do enough for this faction because everyone has 40k defense. So good luck with this faction. I would say the biggest thing is just going to be Ramsh. It's mainly just going to be Ramsh, maybe Digas. But these are just all splash characters. There's none of these characters I would really recommend to be able to beat this. FC Lepin's probably going to be pretty decent. All these characters are going to be able to, regardless of their typing, are going to be able to break Lunar because if you have Signature Force for them. FC Brooke might be nice because she does a ton of damage, but not enough to justify bringing her, in my opinion. Anastasia is probably the only other character I could think of with Ramsh that you would want from this faction, just for the heals. I can't really think of anyone else. Oh, FC Iris. But I wasn't even thinking about it from a faction perspective. She's just so good that she probably, you know, she obviously counts for this faction, but just the other characters it's a little rough. This is the first time I really looked at it from the perspective of which factions you really invested into, but this faction might actually, Brun's faction might be fine. You know, obviously Dorka's very good for the healing. Brun, I think these are also, this is another faction you can splash in. Dorka's always going to be a really good character to splash in. Very good character. And these characters here, I don't think many people have these characters invested into, but they're not going to really bring much to the table for this. I mean, you have the right typing in these two, but that's about it. I would just completely just splash in just Dorka. And then when it comes to this faction in Vagabond, this one actually might be pretty good because okay, just kidding. Okay. So when it comes to Vagabond, I think this faction doesn't do well either because, all right. And lastly, if you're really invested into Vagabond, I think this faction can actually do pretty good because you really cover one of the big things is you need a ton of light breaks for this particular piece of content. Master's Footsteps is like the ones that I keep saying are good. It grants Master Footsteps to an ally with lower defense than the caster. It's all about your team's defense. So I really like that. And you'll be able to have access to all of his abilities here, and you'll just want to splash him with a lot of the good characters that are consistent throughout all these other. It would actually be pretty nice to have it, to be able to actually keep all of the passives here. I wish I could confidently talk about how his interactions work and how that would play out, but I don't have them. I haven't really used him too much. I feel like looking at this, he'd be actually he's very good, especially for this. If you really invested into him, it would be entirely possible to be able to beat this with this comp here. If you just splash them as like two of them, or if you get you definitely want the more of these. You really want to have a lot of these characters on here. So I think this is a good faction for this. Only obviously a few characters worth even mentioning. It'd probably be him and Xeon that you'd want to actually use with this. Maybe COA as a good healer, as a decent healer, I guess. Well, that's about it. Like, so you have the healer, you have him, and probably does enough damage. You would just need to find other characters that can meet the requirements to break. I would say you'd probably need Ramj and Tantalo or Talia as a healer, and then you'd probably be fine if you have a heavy investment into Vagabond. This is a lot longer than I was expecting. If you stuck through it, cool. It was helpful. That's awesome. Good luck in being able to beat chapter 15, and you guys have a good one. Peace.